Hi, you are watching the 2026 Heritage Interview Series at the American Association for Public Opinion Research. This is an installment in our Pioneers Interview Series. This is Jason Kosakow. We are lucky to have Mandy Sha, who is a trailblazer in our field, who will be interviewing Earl Babbie.
I'm Mandy Sha.
Earl Babbie started teaching sociology in 1968 and is professor emeritus at Chapman University. Known for writing over 10 textbooks about social research methods, his book, The Practice of Social Research, has been in print for more than 50 years. Throughout his distinguished career, he was active at the American Sociological Association and served as president of both the Pacific and California Sociological Associations. In 2000, the Society for Applied Sociology honored him with the Lester F. Ward Award for his distinguished contributions to applied sociology. In 2012, Chapman University dedicated the Earl Babbie Research Center with the mission of empowering students and faculty to conduct studies that address critical social, behavioral, economic, and environmental problems. Earl, thanks for taking the time to speak with us today.
I appreciate the opportunity to let it all hang out.
With a distinguished career spanning decades, as Jason mentioned in his introduction, you continue to influence young minds today through the numerous textbooks that you authored. What's your origin story? And what I mean by that, what motivated you to pursue a career in social research?
First of all, I'm honored to be here, Mandy. Thank you for that, and Jason. Uh, I often refer to this as an accidental career. For me, it started, you won't believe this, but in seventh grade, when the teacher went around the room and asked what we wanted to be when we grew up. And my divorced mom had just remarried, and I had a father that I was so proud of, and he was an auto body mechanic. And so I said I wanted to be an auto body mechanic. And the teacher, to his credit, he said, well, that's fine, but you do so well in school, maybe you should go to college and you could become an engineer. And so I started thinking about that and thinking about a career in engineering and trying to learn about it. And my senior year in high school, it was time to apply to colleges. And my best friend was applying to Harvard. And so I applied to Harvard. Uh, no one suggested it would be a good idea to apply to more than one college. I ended up being accepted at Harvard with a Navy ROTC scholarship. The first thing I discovered there was that they didn't offer engineering at that time. I decided to major in physics. And I probably got a C in the physics course, uh, a C in German, which I really hated and dropped after one semester. But calculus just did me in. And it kind of looked like maybe I wouldn't be graduating from Harvard after all. I mean, I did so poorly. Uh, but I could stay one more semester at least. And I ended up in a course in social anthropology, which I knew nothing about. And it just blew me away. I mean, class after class after class, I just couldn't believe the different ways that human beings organize their social life. I mean, I was from a rural Vermont village, small town, and I was just won over. And it turned out Harvard had a major called social relations, sociology, social psychology, and social anthropology. And so I was now majoring in the social sciences in that. And I loved it. I learned to love learning. I where I thought I was going to fail at Harvard, I actually graduated with honors. I mean, that was unbelievable. And by senior year, I decided this was my home. This is what I really needed. And I made an appointment with one of my professors, Talcott Parsons, who was probably the best known sociologist in the world at that time. And it eventually became apparent to me that he thought I was writing a term paper about careers in sociology. And I finally just blurted out, I want to be one. Well, okay. Uh, you should go to graduate school. So I wrote that down. And I said, where should I go? And he said, somewhere else. Then he saw the look on my face and he said, no, everyone should go somewhere else. You shouldn't do all your studies in the same place. And I said, well, okay, where should I go? And he said, oh, I don't know. Go to Berkeley. So I wrote that down.
And was it at Berkeley where you got formally introduced to survey research?
Well, when I arrived at Berkeley, uh, I drove across country, sleeping in the back of my car at night. And I found Berkeley, I found North Hall, where sociology was headquartered. And I reported in to the two secretaries at the desk. And they welcomed me and they said, who do you want as an advisor? I said, I don't know who's here. I only came because, Professor Parsons said I should come here. And they said, what are you interested in? I said, well, I'm kind of interested in the sociology of religion. And I remember this precisely. They looked at each other and one of them said, let's give him to Glock. And I said, Charles Glock? Is he here? I read an article he wrote. And so I was, wow. Uh, so that's how I knew about Charles Glock. When I went to meet him, I discovered he was the founder and director of the Survey Research Center. And that was my first contact really with survey research. I wasn't quite sure what that was. Uh, but we went through the first semester. I worked it was called a reader in his course in sociology of religion. I think it paid $200 for the semester, which in those days was not considered very much money. But at the end of that first semester, I'd run out of all my money. And so I went to my advisor, Charles Glock, and said, I need a job or something. I don't know what to do. And so he hired me as a research assistant at the Survey Research Center. And so I started learning survey research really in a mentor relationship with Charlie. Uh, and I think I did well. He had done a study years before and never finished writing up the book. And so he brought me on as a co-author to analyze the data and write the book. And that became my first book, To Comfort and to Challenge, a study of Episcopalians, co-authored with Charlie Glock and another person. And so I was doing really well there, and I was really starting to learn survey research, and I got to direct a study or two. Uh, at one point, I think I was acting director for, a month or something like that. Uh, and then Professor Doug Yamamura from the University of Hawaii came to visit Charlie and said, we want to start a survey research center in Hawaii. How do we do that? And he said, well, you should hire a new graduate, someone like Earl, and you won't have to pay him that much, and have him set it up. And so I was hired. I went out.
It was at the University of Hawaii when you started writing textbooks. Tell me the exact moment when it happened.
So I was at the University of Hawaii setting up a survey research center with no funds. There was no budget for it, and teaching survey research methods. And I had so much trouble picking a textbook. I looked at the ones on sort of on survey research. I ended up selecting one that was written in Britain, uh, which confused my students with the ministry of this and the ministry of that. Uh, and one day, in my frustration, I sat down and wrote a table of contents for what would be the perfect survey research textbook. And the next day, I got a letter from Wadsworth Publishing saying, we want to do a textbook on survey research, and somebody mentioned you. So we signed up, uh, did the book in survey research methods. Uh,
When I was in school, your book, The Practice of Social Research, was a required text. It was the seventh edition, and I still have it on my bookshelf. Today, the book is in its 15th edition and has been translated into many languages. What do you think is the reason that made this and your other textbooks so widely adopted?
I wish I knew for sure, but I have ideas about it. And I think a part of it is I started using first and second uh, person. So I'd say if you and I were doing a study, what we would want to do is la la la. And I just talked in first and second person. If we needed a third person, we got Pat or Jan, somebody with androgynous names. Uh, but mainly I talked in the first and second person. And I started getting letters from students who said, I thought you were talking directly to me. And I think that's been a part of the success of the books is that, and I feel that way. I'm not trying to impress the students with how wonderful I am. I think a lot of textbook authors try to impress the professors who will be teaching the course, and they are the ones that'll adopt the textbook. But I learned very early on uh, that if the students are happy with the book, the professors will adopt it. And I seem to make students happy with the book. I got a lot of mail from students telling me about their experiences of it. And so
In
I think for me,
today's
I think that was a big part of the success.
in today's vernacular, they are called fan mail.
Right.
What other ways were your textbooks one of the first?
I was writing the book at a time when the third person masculine pronoun was the rule of English. And so I would say when the researcher starts, he picks a sample, and it was always he, because that's what you're expected to do. And I came to a chapter on key punching. I was starting to write a chapter on key punching. Every key puncher I'd ever known was a woman. And I just couldn't talk about key punchers as he. Uh, and so I got some consultation from people who were starting to do the women's movement. And for that book, I ended up with a huge footnote at the beginning of that chapter saying, I've used the male masculine, blah, 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 normally, but most of the key punchers are women. So I've talked about her and like that. But I want to be clear that women can do research as directors of research every bit as well as men can. And in fact, they are doing it. So I want to be clear about that. So that was my solution for that book, but I wasn't happy with it. And so when I started doing the practice of social research, I decided to violate another rule of English, and that was I would switch to plural. So I would, we do it all the time in everyday language. I say, when a student comes in for advising, I have them sit over there, even though I'm talking about one person. And so I started using plural. Editors didn't like that at all, but I sort of got some of that through.
Many of us are experienced with writing research papers, technical reports, and edited volumes and monographs. How is writing a textbook different?
Well, I think articles, you're reporting research that you've done, or for theory, things you've thought about, and you're trying to explain that, communicate that. But I don't think you're trying to teach the reader how to do that. And in a textbook, that's absolutely what you're doing, is you're teaching the students how to do research. And again, I think I really want to stress the partnership with students. I found that in my teaching also. Uh, One day I was trying to get some concept across in a research methods course, and nobody was getting it. I mean, they were just people, they didn't. So about halfway through the class, I said, okay, class dismissed. Go to your homes. Uh, I'm going to go back to my study and figure out what's going wrong here. And when I come back on Thursday, we'll take this topic up again and you'll get it. And when I went back and really studied what the concept was and how I was explaining it, I almost always found there was something that didn't work for me in it. There was something I didn't fully understand, something that didn't quite make sense. And once I saw that, then I saw how to communicate this so that it would work. And I come back the next class and I present the topic again, and the students would get it. And so I told my students, I said, look, if you don't understand something, tell me, raise your hand, say you don't understand it, because every time you don't understand it, there's something in it that doesn't work for me, and I end up getting smarter. So thank you for that. This is really a partnership. And I think that worked for me in teaching as well as writing textbooks.
And what would your advice be for young scholars and researchers who may wish to pursue a writing career like you did?
I think in my case, I found I loved writing. In fact, survey research methods, I wrote while I was starting up the Survey Research Center in Hawaii. And I remember so clearly sitting at my desk, IBM Selectric, somebody would come in, we'd talk about whatever their problem was, and then I'd go back to writing. The phone would ring and I'd answer that, and then I'd go back to writing. My best day, I wrote 2 chapters, and they required almost no editing. So I would say the first thing uh, for writing, you better hope you love it. I mean, if you see it as something, and oh God, I've got to do this if I want to get promoted, and so forth, it's probably going to be a very painful process. And if it's painful, it probably won't be real successful. So I think that's a part of it. That I think you need to be clear about what your purpose is. What do you want to accomplish in this article or textbook or whatever? Um, and once you get clear about that, then I think you can be more effective in pursuing it.
What do you think about some people using AI to help them write?
I say I have mixed feelings about AI. And AI writing term papers or writing articles or like that dangerous. I mean, I suppose you could say, I want to read a really good book on X, Y, and Z. And so you get AI to write that book for you. And then you read it and you say, oh, yay, that's good. I got out of it what I wanted. But to then try to publish it as your work. But I did try one thing. I have Chat GT, I think it is, on my computer. Uh, So I said, "Who is Earl Babbie?" And it wrote a very flattering paragraph, which I liked. And then I said, write a survey question on ethnicity. And it came out with a survey question on ethnicity, which wasn't bad. I thought that, that was not bad. Obviously, if you use it that way, you've got to review what it comes up with and be prepared to correct it, change it, whatever. Uh, but it may think of ways of asking a question that you didn't think of. And you look at it and say, oh, I wish I thought of that. That's a good idea. So I think there may be some uses for it. But it so much depends on the kind of survey you're doing. When I was in Hawaii, I did a student survey very early on, and I asked about ethnicity, and I think I had 10 ethnic categories. And for some reason, I thought to I had to call them or a space, said write in the number for that corresponds to your ethnicity. And then I had your mother and your father, write it in there. And then your grandfather, grandmother, grandfather, grandmother. And for grandparents, students were writing in like three different numbers, that there was so much racial mixing over time, a long time. So AI may be able to help, but it can't anticipate everything, and you need to really use it carefully, I think. You're still in charge. If you let it get in charge, I think you're in trouble.
Yeah, tell us more about the people who influence your career besides Professor Talcott Parsons.
Charlie Glock is probably number one. I mean, I learned from him. He became a good friend of mine. He's now passed away. But I visited him after he'd retired. I visited him in Idaho. And in fact, when I was uh, leaving the University of Hawaii, my textbooks were doing really well, and my publisher was saying, you should quit teaching and just write. So I thought, how do you resist that kind of compliment? And so I decided I would do that. I would resign from the University of Hawaii, go back to the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. Uh, and it turned out that Charlie was taking kind of a hasty retirement just as I was moving back to the Bay Area. So I became a temporary, visiting, I guess, professor for a couple of quarters. They were on the quarter system. Um, and so Charlie and I are just, we're very close, and I learned an awful lot from him. Well, when I was at Berkeley, uh, most of the researchers were men. Uh, and that didn't seem strange to most people. But when I was working on my medical study, I think particularly, maybe some of the others, when I had an idea about how to do something, how to study something, I would usually go to Gertrude Selznick, who was the wife of Phil Selznick, who was the chairman of political science. And I still think Gertrude was one of the smartest people I've ever known. I, I would say, well, I'm thinking of asking a question like this. And she'd say, well, yeah, I can see that, but there might be someone who would, like that. Uh, so she, for me, was a real influence. I mentioned only one other person. Uh, he should have been a bigger influence for me, but uh, Rensis Likert, the Likert scale that we use, strongly agree, agree, disagree. Rensis Likert, who'd been at University of Michigan, I believe, he retired to Hawaii. And at about the same time, I was coming there to set up the survey center. And as I understand it, our president of the university, Harlan Cleveland, uh, met with Rensis. And I had met with Rensis and Jane, his wife, a couple of times, I think, just socially. And so Rensis and Harlan were talking, and Harlan said, "Well, we want to set up a survey research center. What should we do?" And I'm told that Lickard said, "Just let Earl do what he's doing. It'll all turn out." So, I appreciate that, even though I never worked with him. I felt kind of a kinship to Ren Lickard.
I love what you said that mentors can eventually become friends as you develop in your career, and that mentors come in all shapes and sizes, and that sometimes you can even be mentored simply by observing them. Let's talk about Chapman University's Earl Babbie Research Center. How did it come about?
So I have to say I am so honored by that. When I was retiring from Chapman, one of the deans called me in and said, "We're planning to create a research center that will mainly train students in handling the kinds of things that you mentioned." And my wife and I were sitting there listening to that, and I'm thinking, well, I don't have my checkbook because I, I'm sure we're going to be getting to that at some point. And I'm saying, that sounds great. I think that's wonderful. And she said, and we'd like to name it after you. And once I stopped crying, I said, okay. I would be really honored with that, and I am. I'm so pleased with the things they're doing. The Starting in 2014, uh, the center did a study of American fears, and has been doing it each year since, asking people what are afraid of. And, they're afraid of losing a loved one, they're afraid of being terminally ill, they're afraid of various things. Number one, at least for the last several years, is government corruption. That they're most afraid that, the politicians uh, will do bad things. And I certainly think they have good reason for that fear. Uh, but I mean that has made a real contribution. They have so many citations now for that survey. Every time it comes out, it's in the thousands of citations. Uh, and I think it's worth drawing attention to what concerns people.
Earl, I understand that the Babbie Center has a global vision with concerns about human rights, social justice, peaceful solutions to social conflicts, and environmental sustainability. Do you see these as the most pressing problems that researchers and policymakers must address and solve?
Would be my particular bias. Everything you listed, you know, to be truly human, we really need to deal with those issues. And the thing I love about the Babbie Center is that it's training students to address problems like that. And I won't say the children are our future, but I mean that's really it. The students that we're training will be our discipline in the future. And
With AI being so pervasive in everything that we do today, would you still tell today's generation to pursue a career in the social sciences?
absolutely encourage people to go for it. and for a number of reasons. Uh, I think there's so many problems we have to solve, and you did a good job of listing them earlier. Uh, the social sciences are the ones that will solve those problems, and we really need to get students concerned with solving problems. And if I can take a side, uh, problems in my life often end up being wonderful things that happen. One summer in Hawaii, I volunteered to teach a course in social problems. And I had this image somehow that the first class, there'd be 6 students, and we'd sit around a table and we would just talk about what problems concern us. And I went to the first meeting of the class, and there were 40 students, all, in rows of chairs. And I gave them a multiple guess midterm exam, and I handed them back, and we talked a little bit about the exam. And several of the students said, "Well, I hope that I would do better. Uh, can I write a term paper for extra credit?" And I thought, oh God, here I am. I'm in Hawaii. I've got 40 students who are going to write term papers about rape and pollution and war. And I'm going to have to read them and grade them. And out of nowhere, I've had this happen to me in teaching more than once. I heard myself talking. I said, if you solve a problem, I'll give you 3 points of extra credit. And that sort of quieted things down because nobody knew what that meant, including me. And so we kind of looked at it and I said, well, it has to be a social problem. If it's something that bugs you, deal with it. It has to be a broader problem than that. Uh, if you cause the problem, clean it up. That won't count. It has to be a problem that nobody expects you to do anything about, and you step in and you completely solve it. And I said, I mean completely. Don't just give it the college try and make it a little better. You have to completely solve it. So world hunger is a huge problem that's concerned me much of my life. Uh, but it's probably not a good choice for this assignment. I said, if you end world hunger, I'll give you 3 points, maybe even 5 points. But pick something, smaller than that. I had no idea what they would do, but I said, and write me a little report. I made up a form, which was what was the problem? What did you do? And then as a kind of an afterthought, I said, did anybody see you do it? And what was their reaction? Which was the smartest part of the whole assignment. One that I recall was driving home on a highway that I drove on, uh, and he saw broken glass in one of the lanes. So he pulled over to the side, and when traffic would lighten up, he'd run out and pick up some glass and come back. And I'm reading this saying, holy, he's running out in traffic to do this. And then it occurred to me that he filled out the report, so he must have made it back. Uh, and his final comment was, when I had picked up all the glass, I just stood there for a minute and looked at the highway, and I felt it was my highway. I thought, whoa, oh my God. Well, I'll tell you one other story. A young girl from a neighbor island in Hawaii, Kauai, Maui, something, coming to Honolulu to the University of Hawaii. This was exciting to her. It was going to change her life. She'd make new friends. They would do things and etc. And she said none of that happened. Like nobody talks to anybody else. They don't get together to do stuff. And, she was really disappointed. And so she made up a big poster And she discovered that in the dorm where she lived, in the dining room, if you wanted to skip a meal like Saturday, if you tell them that Thursday, then Saturday they'll give you a piece of raw meat, a steak or something like that, so you can have a barbecue. Uh, and she thought that was a great idea. So she made up a big poster and she described that and had lines for people to sign up for it. And she made up 5 posters and put one in each of the ladies' rooms, their communal bathrooms, in the dorm. And I mean, you look at how much work went into that. And she started looking at the posters. Nobody signed up. I mean, nobody. Well, she then went out in the hallway and stopped a girl and said, did you see the poster in there and what we could do and wouldn't it be great? And really enrolled her in what a good idea it was. At least the girl was saying yes, yes. And so she took her by the hand into the bathroom and had her sign up. Then she went down to the next floor and did the same thing. And she did that on all the floors. And then she noticed people were signing up without her doing anything. And pretty soon they were all, the posters were filled up. She said, we had the most wonderful cookout. People were calling her and saying, what do you have for a barbecue? My dad's got a hibachi. I can bring that and we blah, blah, blah. And do you have any music? Do you have Barry Manilow? And all this, they were all getting excited. And she said, we had the cookout and it was wonderful. Everybody enjoyed it. And we planned the next 2 weekends, what we would do. And she says, okay, college is what I thought it would be. Oh my God, this young, she's probably 19 years old. Uh, so I think if you can get that across to students, that there are real problems that need to be solved, and they're the ones who can solve them. They don't just need to count on the old folks who control everything and know everything. You have to engage them and empower them to do it. And I think if we can do that in the social sciences, and I think the social sciences are where you do that, then I think we'll have something we can be really proud of.
Earl, something I think about pretty often, especially in our field, is we do a lot of work to understand society. And I believe it's important, the work that we do in understanding, our communities, our societies, just to understand what's important to us as a whole. But I'm just curious, where do we see social science research in a democratic society?
I've said often that social sciences, people sometimes quibble with that. And I say, no, we really are the sciences. Physics is easy. If you take a pencil and you drop it, it falls down. You take a pencil, you drop it, it falls down. Now imagine that pencil said, I don't want to fall. Don't make me fall. I don't believe in gravity, etc. If physics had to deal with things like that, it would be a much more complicated field. In sociology, we're dealing with social sciences, we're dealing with issues that have not been dealt with by the other so-called sciences. And I think one day, I may not live to see it, but one day I think sociology will be recognized as the first science. I think that was the title of one of the presidential addresses I gave, that I truly believe we in the social sciences will one day be recognized as a first science, that they really faced up to, complications and solved them. Thank you, Mandy. And Jason, it was just an honor to be here with you. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you to everyone who's watching. Also, Mandy, thank you as always for your hard work and dedication to making sure that our history is alive and well and understood. We are looking forward to future installments of this and have a great day.